Obviously, the FMD threat has not diminished, but has it improved in Bali, and therefore does the threat risk to Australia also reduce given the tourism travel between Bali and Australia?
Well, the latest estimate that we have as to the risk of foot and mouth getting to Australia is still just under 12% over the next 5 years. So as I've said before, it's a relatively low risk, but it's not zero, and that's why we've had to increase these measures to try to keep it out. In fact, the greater risk is actually a different disease called lumpy skin disease, which has a higher risk of coming in here because the most likely way that would happen is by mosquitoes bringing it in if they're blown over in a cyclone or something like that, and that's why we're taking measures to stop that from happening too. But certainly the reports that we're getting from Indonesia are positive. Obviously the 1 million vaccines that we initially announced that we would be providing to Indonesia have now arrived in Indonesia, and Indonesia is distributing those and administering those now. Yep. They themselves have found more vaccines that they're starting to administer, and I think that the impression that I've got from both from when I was in Indonesia and since coming back is that the government there is putting particular effort into Bali in recognition that there is a lot of trade and travel there. And we've been very clear that we're happy to keep supporting Indonesia in any way we can. So
you said you were going to send vets over, and how can you tell me if that has happened and how many of these 1 million vaccines have actually been administered?
So in terms of vets, the Australian chief vet has already made a number of visits to Indonesia to provide vets and the Indonesian government with advice about how we can assist and how they can better manage the outbreak. We've also had our deputy chief vet over there as well. We've got one of the world leading authorities who is an Australian around the production of vaccines, who's been in Indonesia working with them about their plans to domestically produce vaccines as well. And that's in addition to a whole lot of online assistance that's been provided, you know, whether it be by Teams or Zoom or whatever platform they're using to provide that kind of training as well. In terms of the vaccines, as I say, the first 1 million vaccines that we said that we would provide to Indonesia arrived there a couple of weeks ago. The Indonesian government has assured us that they are being distributed and administered now, and that's in addition to the vaccines that Indonesia has procured in their own right. Beyond that, I have announced that we would be providing another $10 million in support for Indonesia, and that will include millions more vaccines. There is a worldwide shortage of these vaccines at the moment, but I know that our department has a procurement process well underway, and hopefully it won't be too long before more vaccines will arrive there too.
Okay, but you don't know how many have actually been administered. Are you due for an update on that? Do you suspect, do you have any kind of inkling in percentage terms what that might be?
Yeah, I mean, I don't keep track of every single vaccine that's administered in another country, but certainly we've been assured by the Indonesian government that they are distributing and administering those vaccines, and I am getting regular updates to make sure that that is happening. One of the pleasing things that we are seeing also back from Indonesia is that the number of vaccinations that have been administered is well more than the number of infected cattle and livestock. Okay. The latest report that we've had from Indonesia is that they have administered over 2 million vaccines into their livestock population, whereas they're talking about sort of 600,000 or so infected animals. So they are making progress. You know, it's a difficult, Indonesia has more than 10,000 islands. It's a population of 240 million, but my impression is that they are progressing well.
Okay, just before I let you go then, I asked you about the risk. Is the risk any better or worse than it was a couple of months ago when we were talking about this and potentially shutting borders and all those things?
Yeah, look, as I say, the expert advice to us based on percentages hasn't changed since the most recent estimate that were provided. That's the best estimate that we have, but I think logically you would say that with the additional measures that we have put in place at the borders, the vaccination program that's happening in Indonesia and other things as well, I think logically you would expect that risk has come back a bit, but we're still working on the presumption that it's around about that 12% mark.
Murray Watt, great to talk to you. Thanks so much.
Thanks, Laura.